what is going on in the New South Wales government? They've lied to you, the people of New South Wales, and pushed regional travel back yet again. And they've tried to smother the news with an announcement that came out of nowhere. That is, from November 1, there'll be no more hotel or home quarantining for overseas arrivals. But the Prime Minister has come out in the last hour or so, a media conference at Kirribilli House, and clarified that there will not be an influx of tourists into New South Wales, and the border will open first to Aussie citizens, residents, and immediate family members. Today's attempted deflection by the Premier was so disrespectful to those in the regions who've been dudded. They didn't deserve to have the big news that their towns will remain closed to Sydney shoved to the bottom of the news pile. Regional travel was first going to be allowed at 70% double dose. Then it was 80% double dose. Then, reports yesterday afternoon, well, it could be October 25. Well, that's now gone. And now it's November 1. Well, we think. Honestly, you shake your head. Well, Stuart Ayres is the New South Wales Tourism Minister, and he's been good enough to stick his head above the fray, and he joins me on the line to answer some questions. Minister, welcome back to Drive.
Good afternoon, Jim. Always a pleasure to be with you.
So, convince me. Actually, more importantly, convince my audience. Convince my audience that the state government hasn't lied to them for a third time around regional travel dates.
So, Jim, this is definitely not the government lying, which I think is too harsh a word to use here. I will freely accept and say to all of your listeners, we have moved the goalposts. There's no doubt about that. But we have moved the goalposts because we have, as we have all the way through the course of this pandemic, prioritised the health of our citizens over the economy. We have attempted at every step of the way to strike that balance correctly, and we have made that decision, and an immensely difficult decision, to do that again. The reason why we've done that is because there is too large a gap between the vaccination rates in Sydney and the vaccination rates across regional New South Wales.
But just on that, Minister, just on that. I'm looking at the list now as of Monday, the averages. City of Sydney, 63.3%, double vaxxed. Randwick, 68.4%. Places like Wallandilly, 77%. Then you go to places like Gilgandra, 83.7%. I mean, I'm sorry, I've got a list in front of me where the averages are actually much higher in a lot of country areas than they are actually here in Sydney.
So there are definitely locations, Jim, where the vaccination rates in regional locations are very high, and that's a great thing. And the point I made earlier today, and I'll make it again on your show, is that this decision is not driven by the fact that vaccination rates in regional New South Wales are slow. They are moving at a really strong speed. But it is patchy across lots of parts of the regions, and we need to make sure that when we're talking about percentages, the percentages in a number of these regional locations are often quite small populations. The percentages in Sydney are a very large population. If Sydney is at 80% fully vaccinated, then you're going to end up with upwards of 1 million people who are capable of travelling into the regions before they've completed their vaccine. And we have said over and over again that people who are fully vaccinated still have the capacity to spread the virus around, even though that is dramatically reduced. This is really just a safety mechanism to make sure that in this final stages of coming out of the pandemic, that we don't put unnecessary health risk into the regions. Now, that does come at a consequence. It comes at a consequence for a lot of tourism operators who have taken bookings. It comes at a consequence of family members who want to reunite with people that they haven't seen for many, many months. To make this decision does cause distress. I'm not walking away from that. But we have every step of the way made sure we've made decisions that protect people's health, that protect our health system. And in regional New South Wales, we do not want to fall at the final hurdle. So we've taken this tough call to make sure we just take an extra 2 weeks. For many, many people, it probably would have only been 1 week because most people were thinking that we were going to be at 80% the Monday after being the 25th. But we have, once again, gone really quickly in Sydney. That's made this gap 2 weeks. I know it has some downside. I know it's got a lot of frustration from many people, but there's also a lot of people in regional New South Wales today breathing a sigh of relief that they don't have to worry about large numbers of people from Sydney coming into their communities before they've got to higher rates of vaccination.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people who are listening, not just in the bush, but also around Greater Sydney, who are separated from loved ones. They went and rolled up their sleeves on the promise of the government, the assurance of the government, that at 70% they'll be able to go back to regional New South Wales. Then it became 80%, which kicks in and takes effect from Monday. That's now changed. October 25 has been scrapped. It's now November 1. I mean, you can understand their frustrations because this is causing a lot of hurt, a huge toll on people's mental well-being, let alone costing the economy tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, there's no doubt, Jim, that making these changes does cause angst and anger and frustration. We accept that, but we have to accept that on the basis that we're making a decision that is based on really sound health evidence that says to us we should not put regional New South Wales at an unnecessary level of risk at this final hurdle. We've worked so hard to get to this point. It would be so devastatingly bad if we allowed people in Sydney to travel to a region and the virus got into one of those communities with relatively low vaccination rates, and then we had to start locking down regional LGA.
Yeah, but I mean, you've obviously got concerns about that regional health system and the strain that it will put on it. But isn't that the whole idea of actually getting vaccinated to take some of the heat off that system?
There's no doubt about that, Jim. And people in regional New South Wales are getting vaccinated, and they're getting vaccinated at a rapid rate. People in Sydney are getting vaccinated at a rapid rate. But we've just got too many communities that are just not where we need them to be to have the confidence to let large numbers, in excess of there's 5 million plus people who live in the Greater Sydney region, probably closer to 6 million. You can't let that percentage of people out across the regions unless you are confident that the vaccination rates in regional New South Wales are at the level that they need to be to protect those communities. It's not about protecting the Sydney-siders who have got those high rates of vaccination. It's about making sure we protect the regions. And I'd love to see people in Sydney being able to travel across regional New South Wales. As a tourism minister, I spend every day encouraging people to do things like that. But at this particular point in time, we've just got to take the cautious approach for the next 14 days. We've worked so hard to get to this point. Let's not fall at the final hurdle.
I've got a question from Deborah in Orange. She wants to know what happens if regional areas never reach the vaccine rates that the New South Wales government wants. Will they never open up?
Well, I would say to, I think it was Deborah, that we're really confident that those vaccination rates are continuing to climb. We're seeing people that are, we're seeing first dose vaccination rates that are very high. You just quoted a number of them. The best indicator of second dose vaccination rates is first dose vaccination rates. Yep. So we will continue to see that climb. I'm really confident we'll get those rates that we want across the regions. We just need a few more days to get there.
Okay, a few more days. It's more than 2 weeks. So, okay, let's fast forward to November 1. Cast iron guarantee, no ifs, no buts. We're heading back to regional New South Wales, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've heard that before, though. We've heard that before. You can understand people's uncertainty and doubting when there's been promises made before and they've been broken.
Understand why people will have a question mark. I've said earlier, there's no doubt the government's moved the goalpost here. We put them in the ground. The vaccination rates are not at the level we want them to be in regional New South Wales. We've moved the goalpost.
Okay, how about some of these regional centres? How about some of these regional centres that are up around over 80% double vax? Why can't you reopen parts of regional New South Wales? Why is there a blanket ban? And why are the vaccinated being punished for those who choose not to get the jab?
So we're not punishing people who have been vaccinated. What we're making sure is that the amount of people across communities that have not been vaccinated don't cause unnecessary strain on our health system. This is not about punishing people who have been vaccinated. We want people to be vaccinated. We want them to have access to more freedoms. The other reason why we've gone with a whole of regional New South Wales approach is because it becomes very, very difficult, Jim, to create a compliance regime that allows police and our health services and local communities and even business operators to determine where people are coming from and where they're going to. People can move freely around regional New South Wales at the moment, but those numbers, because of the population densities, are much, much lower The real challenge here that we've got to account for is the large number of people who live in Sydney who could travel into the regional settings. I know I said days before, and it is a matter of days. We've been doing this for months. We're now approaching 2 years. We're literally at the last 14 days. Let's make sure we still make the right decisions. We still take a prudent approach to this. If we do that, we're going to be in a much, much stronger position. So we can go through summer, we can get into 2022, and we can leave this pandemic behind us.
Okay, just before I let you go, this announcement today, a very significant announcement about our borders and about quarantine, scrapping quarantine. To me, it reeks of an old-fashioned smother by your government to try and hide today's regional travel news. Why was the quarantine announcement made today? And do you understand why some people in regional New South Wales feel like they've sort of been forgotten about and been overshadowed by this significant announcement as far as borders and quarantine goes?
Well, I completely reject the idea that it's a smother. In fact, these two things are absolutely in unison. It means that New South Wales is open to everyone from the 1st of November who have been fully vaccinated. This is about making sure the entire state is in alignment, that Sydney can travel to regional New South Wales if you're fully vaccinated, that fully vaccinated people in regional New South Wales can travel to Sydney, that if you're overseas and you're fully vaccinated, you're welcome to come into New South Wales. All we've done today is announce that there will be no quarantine for people who are fully vaccinated. Completely respect the Commonwealth's decision around who comes into Australia, the visa circumstances under which those entry points take place. Obviously, this is welcome news for Australians who are overseas and haven't been able to get access to a booking on a flight because there's simply not been enough capacity because of the caps. Removing those caps, allowing Australians to come home, is a good thing, but we're also saying that when the Commonwealth is ready to start granting visas to skilled workers or to international students or to leisure travellers or business travellers, they can do so, but we're just sending a very clear signal that in New South Wales, if you're fully vaccinated, from the 1st of November, you won't have to quarantine.
Yeah, well, I'm all for welcoming Australians back who are stranded overseas and getting them back home. So that's not the thing here. I just feel like today's been a real letdown for those people in the bush. I can't believe I can fly to Melbourne and Victoria before my own state. That makes me sick. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Thanks for your time this afternoon, Minister.
Thanks, Jim.
Good on you. That's Tourism Minister Stuart Ayres.